The 2025 rotation in the Pokemon TCG is coming soon. And before we say goodbye to these cards, I wanted to put together a list of what I think are the top 20 cards that we will miss when they go away in the 2025 rotation. I'm Jeff from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's talk about what I think are going to be the biggest cards going away. Before we get into the list, I need to provide you with a quick primer on what rotation is, just in case you're not familiar with the concept. Basically, the Pokemon trading card game is played in standard format, where it's a game mode where we only use the most recent 2 to 3 years worth of cards. And once a year, we cut out a chunk of those cards that are now too old, and we make room for new cards. Now, those cards aren't just dead and gone forever. You can still play them in expanded format, which goes all the way back to black and white. Now, if you want some more information regarding rotation, I made a whole frequently asked questions video that you can check out. I'll put the link in the description of this video below. Check that out if you want more info. In regards to what cards are going away, any F block cards are rotating out in 2025. So those cards are generally cards from sets including Brilliant Stars, Astral Radiance, Pokemon Go, Lost Origin, Silver Tempest, and Crown Zenith. And these are, you'll know they're F block cards because you'll look at the bottom left hand corner of your cards and you'll see a letter there. That's your tournament marking. And any cards with the letter F are going away in 2025. At the time of this recording, the Pokemon Company have not officially revealed the rotation date. However, we can make a very strong, educated guess on when it will be based on some recent information. The Pokemon Company has done rotation over the last few years in time with the release of their main March set, and we now know that set is called Journey Together, which is coming out on March 28th, 2025. So if we're following past precedent, rotation for Pokemon TCG Live will most likely occur on March 27th, 2025, and rotation for in-person play will likely happen on April 11th, 2025. Again, these are not 100% confirmed. This is inference based on past precedent. If this information ends up being incorrect, I will update. I'll probably cut this entire section out of the video, but I will put the official dates in the comments below regardless. One more thing before we get to the list, I just want to give you a little bit of rationale for how I came up with this top 20. One, I had a really hard time cutting this down to 10, so it's 20 cards. Two, it's my personal opinion, so if you don't agree with all of how I've ranked these, that's totally fine. Feel free to share your lists in the comments. That's totally cool. Just be respectful. And then I'm ranking these based on their impact on the current meta. What are the cards that we are going to immediately miss as soon as they go away? Because there are certain cards that have had an amazing run, like Arceus V-Star had a fantastic 2 years. It is not on this list, not because it's a bad card. It's a phenomenal card. It had a great run, but it's not meta relevant right now because it's just got power crept out of the game in the last year of its life. So salute to Arceus V-Star, but it didn't make the top 20, not because it's bad, it's just not great right now. Don't worry about Arceus V-Star though, because I am going to follow this video up with a super long video covering every card that was ever meta relevant from the F block. So Arceus V-Star will get its flowers there, including pretty much every card that you're going to say in the comments, Joe, you didn't include this in your top 20. It'll probably be in this upcoming video that I'll launch very soon. So make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn your notifications on so that you can see all of the meta relevant cards that are going away with this upcoming rotation. All right, that's enough preamble. Let's get to the top 20. Kicking things off with Irida, which is a fantastic supporter card, especially if you're playing water decks, and some non-water decks were actually playing Irida as well. It lets you search your deck for a water Pokemon and an item card and put it into your hand. This card was used most in like 2022 with Arceus and Inteleon, where this was an incredibly powerful card, getting you that water Pokemon, whether it was Palkia V, V-Star, Greninja, the Inteleon line, Lumineon later on, and the item cards, just getting those pieces that you needed to build out your board state was fantastic. Now, this card is still played, maybe not as much as before. Back when it first came out, this was a 4 of in every water deck, and certain water decks will still play 4 copies of this card, though we're not seeing it quite as much these days as we did before, and it actually received a bit of a nerf with the launch of the Scarlet and Violet era of the game. We had a core rule change where tool cards were no longer considered items, and Irida got a bit worse because you couldn't get tool cards like Defiance Band or Forest Seal Stone or anything like that. So it did get a nerf, but it's still an incredibly strong card worthy of a spot on this list. 19 is going to sting for players of dark decks like Roaring Moon EX. Dark Patch is such a great card, allowing you to attach a basic dark energy card from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. This is not the first time Dark Patch has rotated, though I would not hold my breath for Dark Patch to come back anytime soon. We do still have some other forms of Dark Acceleration, like Janine's Secret Art, which is not ideal, but it is something. Bibarel is a card that arguably should have been higher on this list. Bibarel is a fantastic draw engine, letting you draw up to 5 cards. It's down here at number 18 because we don't see this card as much anymore, as the format has kind of moved in a different direction. But Bibarel is still a fantastic card and was in the World Championship winning deck in 2022, and no one's ever going to take that World Championship away from Bibarel. At number 17, we've got Raikou V. This is a card that actually took a little bit of time to find its footing in competitive play. When it first came out in Brilliant Stars, it didn't really have a home, but then we saw it in Lost Box, we saw it in Lugia, we then saw it in Miraidon, where we see it mostly. And Raikou's just a really dependable attacker with a little bit of draw power, and this thing hit for decent damage, and in these days it's actually hitting stronger than ever thanks to Area Zero Underdepths, where with that in play and a whole bunch of Pokemon on both benches, Raikou V can potentially one-hit KO almost anything in the game. So Raikou V leaving the game on a high note, and it's probably the most successful of the legendary beasts. Suicune had a great first year, and then it kind of fell off the face of the earth. Entei V had a little bit of a blip in the last year or so, but Raikou V for most of its life has been a competitive staple. At number 16, we've got Palkia V-Star. This was the deck in 2022. And leading up to the World Championships, Palkia was dominating events left and right. And if it wasn't for Arceus with Flying Pikachu, Palkia V-Star would have run away with everything that year. It was incredibly strong with the Inteleon line, but then it lost its way after rotation, and all of the shady dealings kind of went away, and we saw it played with Bibarel and Iron Valiant a little bit, but it's really found its footing in Stellar Crown thanks to Terapagos and Area Zero Underdepths, either using it as a big attacker that can one-hit KO pretty much anything, or more recently, the Dusknoir variant of Palkia, where you're doing solid damage to the active, and then you've got Dusknoir to change the math here and there and blow up targets on the bench. Palkia is very strong right now, and maybe not as strong as it was in the Shady Dealings days, but Palkia V-Star is very much leaving the format on a high note. At number 15, we've got Canceling Cologne. This is an incredibly powerful card that helps players get through our opponent's abilities that can be really annoying, whether it's Snorlax blocking our ability to retreat or Mimikyu blocking our ability to attack it. And we kind of don't have a good answer going forward for how we turn off abilities, or if that's even going to be a thing. So we're gonna have to see what sort of options we have for dealing with wall Pokemon or any sort of these annoying tactics, walling tactics, stalling tactics. What can we do if we don't have Canceling Clone? I'm curious to see what sort of solution Pokemon has in store for us, but in the immediate term, it feels like Canceling Clone is going to be sorely missed. At number 14, we've got Lost Vacuum. It is a fantastic form of stadium removal and tool removal, and Lost Vacuum, the big thing about being able to just remove a specific thing is that you throw it in the lost zone and your opponent has no shot of being able to recover it. Now, we kind of have tool disruption in Jamming Tower, but we don't have anything quite like Lost Vacuum announced so far. So I'm very curious to see what sort of tool removal we have. We're probably going to get something. Before Lost Vacuum, we had like Tool Scrapper, which got rid of 2 tools. Lost Vacuum was a little more versatile. You only got to remove 1 tool, but you got to throw it in the Lost Zone, and you could also use it to vacuum away stadiums. So very curious to see what sort of tool/stadium removal options we get going forward. At number 13, we've got Radiant Charizard, which I think at this point is definitively the second best Radiant Pokemon. But for a time, there was a solid argument that Radiant Charizard was the best Radiant Pokemon. The entire Radiant line of Pokemon are going away. Some of them are more impactful than others, and Radiant Charizard had an amazing run. In Lost Box, it was the star of its own deck. We saw Radiant Charizard as the sole attacker in a Shady Dealings deck, and actually won a regionals with basically Radiant Charizard as the deck's only attacker, which is pretty wild to see. And these days, Radiant Charizard is running with Regidrago as well as Charizard, and we've seen it in a couple of other decks as well. Very strong card that is arguably, actually in the editing of this video, I actually moved it up a little bit, and I think there are going to be people in the comments that will argue that this should be even higher on the list, which I think is a fair point. At number 12, we've got Rotom V. This is a card that actually did not see play for a very long time. It wasn't until the advent of Arvinzard, where players figured out the combination of Arvin and Lumineon plus 4 Seal Stone was a really good combo to set up that deck. Rotom V then got added as a way of drawing cards at the end of your first turn. And really, that's kind of all Rotom V does, is help you draw cards at the end of your turn, and usually only the first turn. But in certain setup heavy decks where you're trying to grab as many pieces as you can at the end of your turn so you can pop off on turn 2, Rotom V has proven fantastic, and its presence is going to be sorely missed because it's such a key piece in many Stage 2 decks. The other thing that makes Rotom V fantastic is that it's an amazing target for 4 Seal Stone, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Just missing the top 10 is Lumineon V. This is a fantastic card that helps you grab a supporter card from your hand when you bench Lumineon. Yes, it's a 2-prize liability, but the benefit of grabbing a supporter is oftentimes better than the potential threat of getting your Lumineon boss KO'd. This is a card that I think it actually was a little... It didn't see as much play when it first came out, which is kind of surprising because we've seen this function before in Tapu Lele GX, which was a staple in many decks in the Sun and Moon era. And then Lumineon V came out and it was kind of the same, and then it didn't see as much play. But in the advent of Charizard finding its footing, Lumineon was one of its key partners, partially because you could grab a supporter card of your choice, and partially because you could combo it with 4 Seal Stone. All of these things are awesome, but just kind of missed the top 10 because of, there's just some other cards that I think were a little more important than Lumineon V, but we're going to miss Lumineon once it rotates. That being said, I mentioned that Lumineon V's function we have seen before in Tapu Lele GX, and I don't have an uncle that works at the Pokemon Company, and I don't have a crystal ball, but considering the fact that we saw this effect rotate before and then come back not long after, I would not be surprised if we saw a card like Lumineon come back in the future. Now let's go into our top 10. If we were doing this list a couple of months ago, Manaphy would definitely be higher. It is the go-to Pokemon for protecting our bench from damage. Now, the problem with Manaphy in the current meta is that we've started seeing a lot of Pokemon that don't drop damage but do damage counters. So cards like Dusknoir and Dragapult, Manaphy unfortunately doesn't block them to the point where a number of decks that would normally run Manaphy aren't running Manaphy anymore. But for many years, Manaphy was your go-to bench protector, and there are still decks that are running Manaphy in order to protect those smaller Pokemon. So as being probably still our best bench protector, it will be missed. We do have Rabsca that is waiting in the wings to be played. It's not really played right now because it is a stage 1 Pokemon you have to evolve up to, and Manaphy is just more convenient because it's a basic, but Rabsca can block more stuff because it also blocks damage counters, even if it takes longer to set up. So Manaphy sort of has its replacement already here, but Manaphy will be missed. At number 9, we've got Double Turbo Energy, a phenomenal card where you just get 2 colorless energy, and yes, you are doing 20 less damage for each double turbo energy you attach, but it facilitates the use of so many attacks in so many different decks that it will be sorely missed. This was probably best known for being Arceus V-Star's go-to energy, but we're seeing double turbo energy in a lot of places, including Miraidon decks for Iron Hands. We also see it in Lugia decks. We see it in what was the other one? Terapagos decks. There are a number of decks that are going to miss double turbo energy, and I'm curious to see if we even get some sort of double turbo energy equivalent. The Pokemon Company might say, yeah, we do have double energy. It's called Neo Upper Energy, and that's it. So, and that's maybe not the answer that a number of players are looking for, but maybe that's the way Pokemon sees it. I do think we'll see some sort of double energy variant, whether it's already Neo Upper Energy and that's it, or maybe they print a new one, but double turbo energy will be missed. At number 8, we've got the busted Forest Seal Stone. Phenomenal card. When you attach this to a Pokemon V, you get to use the V-Star power of grabbing a single card from your deck and put it into your hand. That level of search is incredible, and this was in response to V-Star Pokemon being very popular and strong at the time, and you could use this if you didn't have a deck with a V-Star power, so you could use this as your V-Star power instead. This was in the World Championship winning deck in 2023. Shoutouts to Vance Kelly and their Mew VMAX deck, which had Forest Seal Stone in it, but even outside of that, we see Forest Seal Stone all the time in Charizard decks and many others. Pretty much any deck that is running a Pokemon V that isn't a V-Star, you're going to run Forest Seal Stone because it's fantastic. Now, is there any sort of way to compensate for the loss of Forest Seal Stone in the current format? No, not really, and that kind of sucks. So we'll have to see if we get any sort of search like this, and I'm not sure we do because this card is insanely powerful. At number 7, we have Pokestop. At the time of this card's release, I think we as a community didn't understand how good this card really was. Letting you discard the top 3 cards of your deck and put any item cards you find in there was fantastic for being able to build up your hand, especially if you built a item-based deck where you are more likely hitting good cards than not. It makes it an absolute asset, especially in turbo decks like a Lost Box or a Raging Bolt. Pokestop is phenomenal. And it's not necessarily the end of the world for a bunch of those decks. There are other ways to draw cards, but Pokestop is such a good way of drawing cards, even if there are times where you will Pokestop the 3 absolute worst cards in the world and you will be completely screwed because of Pokestop, which is also part of the fun of Pokestop. I think this card's going to be sorely missed, and we don't have, at least in the immediate term, any sort of alternative to this function. At number 6, we have Snorlax, which is probably the most hated card that is rotating out. Its block ability makes it very annoying, being able to trap Pokemon in the active so that they can't retreat. And this was actually a card that did not see a lot of play when it first came out. It wasn't until Counter Catcher came out the following year when Snorlax really became a deck because it became a lot easier for Snorlax to trap support Pokemon in the active. And while there will be a segment of players that are happy to see this go, I am kind of sad, despite the fact that I don't like playing Snorlax Stall, and I definitely hate fighting against Snorlax Stall. I do respect the fact that one of the win conditions in the Pokemon TCG has always been making sure you have cards and your opponent run out of cards, and Snorlax is definitely a way of winning the game that isn't just smash the active over and over again. And I think the game is healthier when there are more ways to win than just doing big numbers every time. So I'm very curious to see what sort of control strategies and walling strategies look like once Snorlax goes away. We do have cards like Mimikyu and Ogerpon, which aren't quite the same thing, but yeah, Snorlax will be its impact will definitely be felt once it rotates. Number 5 is massive. Kirlia, with that refinement ability, allowing it to discard a card and draw 2 cards. This became huge in Gardevoir EX decks as its draw engine, as well as a way of discarding energy so that Gardevoir can power up its attackers later. The weird thing is that Gardevoir is not losing much, but losing the Kirlia is such an important piece to the deck where if it doesn't get a similar replacement, I'm not sure how this deck survives going forward. I mean, Gardevoir is such an incredibly powerful Pokemon that it'll probably find a way to exist in a new world without Kirlia. I'm just not sure what that looks like right now. So it definitely earns a spot at number 5 and arguably could be even higher on this list. At number 4, I'm very much cheating here, but you kind of can't talk about one card without the other. So the entirety of number 4 is the core of Lost Box. All of these cards work together, throwing cards into the Lost Zone to then activate attacks from Cramorant, Sableye, and Giratina. Colress's Experiment helping you throw even more cards in the Lost Zone, Comfey throwing cards in the Lost Zone, and Mirage Gate attaching multiple energies. And I think you can make the case that Giratina maybe shouldn't belong on this and deserves its own entry, because Giratina was also played in other decks, like such as Arceus Giratina. But I'm going to lump it here because I think Arceus Giratina isn't really meta relevant right now, and Lost Box, there's just so many cards of that core that we're going to lump it all here. Lost Box has been an incredibly strong archetype pretty much the entirety of its existence. It's only really slipped in recent months in light of Kyurem being in the format now, being able to blow up the bench. And even so, Lost Box is still finding a way to be competitive in online and in-person events now, especially now with Pikachu EX being a new big attacker to the deck. It's always been a really cool deck that's really hard to pilot and is really cool to customize because there's so many different ways of playing Lost Box, and losing the entire Lost Zone engine and the Lost Zone mechanic is going to be pretty sad. I would imagine that at some point we're gonna get a new Lost something, because the Lost Zone has been a mechanic in the game before. It went away for a while. It came back different from what we saw last time, and I'm excited to see when it eventually comes back what Lost Zone stuff is going to look like in the future. Cheating again here for number 3 because you can't talk about one without the other. Lugia V-Star with Archeops. Lugia, maybe not the best attacker in the world, very expensive for colorless energy, 220 damage, discard a stadium, but being able to summon 2 Archeops with that summoning star V-Star power is absolutely nuts. Archeops letting you accelerate 2 special energy cards from your deck to one of your Pokemon just like opened up Pandora's box of all of these crazy combinations that you could create. And especially when it first launched in Silver Tempest, this is quite possibly the single most broken deck in the history of the Pokemon TCG. At its peak, you were either playing Lugia or you maybe picked a deck that possibly had a chance against Lugia, but Lugia was probably the last tier 0 deck we saw, and it was absolutely broken. Now, after that rotation, it kind of slipped a little bit in power level. We were playing single strike variants of it, colorless variants of it. In this last year, Chinchino joined as a really strong attacker, and it's had some really great successes in tournament play. It's not the broken deck that it once was, but it has been one of the strongest tournament decks over the last few years, and we're definitely going to feel its effects once it goes away. Number 2 is a card that I almost put at number 1, and I think you can make a very strong argument that this should be number 1. Radiant Greninja is a fantastic card, and arguably the single best card in the Sword and Shield era. Its Concealed the Card's ability lets you discard an energy and then draw 2 cards, and then its Moonlight Shuriken attack is so strong, letting you discard 2 energy and then attacking 2 targets for 90 damage each, helping you snipe out a lot of smaller targets or soften up bigger targets for later. It's a card that literally was the most played card on Pokemon TCG Live because there are so many decks that love having Radiant Greninja in them, whether it's Lost Box or Goldengo, Palkia. So many decks can rely on Radiant Greninja as an asset to that deck, and arguably number 1 just because it's a versatile card that you can splash into almost any deck and make them better. This one's absolutely heartbreaking to me because I love Radiant Greninja, whether it is an attacker or just a way of discarding energy and drawing cards. Its uses are very profound on any deck that puts it in there. So Radiant Greninja here, number 2, number 1 in my heart, arguably should be number 1 on this list. Let me know if you think Greninja should be number 1 over what I'm going to say next. And number 1, Regidrago V-Star. This is a kind of shocking. If we were doing this list at almost any other time in history, Regidrago V-Star would not be here. Regidrago was a card that has faltered for years. When it launched in Silver Tempest, it wasn't seeing a lot of play. I think it did get a Juniors Championship when paired with Arceus, but in the grand scheme of things, it couldn't keep up with the meta of its time because it didn't have the right attacks to copy and it didn't have the right energy acceleration. And that all changed in Twilight Masquerade when we got Teal Mask Ogerpon and Dragapult, the former being able to attach energy and accelerate, and then draw cards, and you energy switch over to the Regidrago V-Star, and then Dragapult having a phenomenal attack to copy has created Regidrago V-Star as the big bad of the game right now. Regidrago V-Star is one of the best decks in the game, if not the best deck in the game right now, and it probably will be right until it rotates. And there we go. That is my list of the top 20 cards that are rotating out in 2025. If I missed one, and I'm sure that you're going to disagree with how I rank them and certain cards that I left off this list, fret not. I am doing a much longer video that's going to cover every card in the F block that was ever meta relevant and give them their flowers there. So be on the lookout for that video soon. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube for that. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so that you will be notified as soon as that video drops, which should be in the very near future. But for now, I gotta get going. Thank you so much for watching. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at InThirdPerson. You can find me on Twitch at InThirdPerson, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And check out the website, InThirdPerson.com, for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. So until the next one, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.